So I'm John Fein, Managing Director for Techstars. I've been with Techstars for about a year. Before that, I worked for United Health Group for 9 years, so made many trips up to Minneapolis. And before that, I worked for 5 different startups. So I kind of have a startup healthcare background. And what we're going to talk about here tonight is going to tell you a little bit about Techstars in general, and then talk mostly about what we do in Kansas City at our accelerator program. What it is, what we do, what types of companies we look for, and that's about it. So I'm going to launch into it, but like I said, anytime you guys have any questions or anything, just stop me and shout it out. I'm supposed to stand over here. I'm off my mark. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's not going to work.
Now
It's
I'm blocking the
okay.
screen.
What are you wearing? That's fine.
You sure?
Yeah.
All right.
We'll take it.
All right. So we're in an accelerator here, obviously, but for a typical accelerator program, raise your hand if you know what an accelerator program does. Okay, cool. So in our accelerator programs, any of the Techstars programs, and we have different types of programs throughout the country and a couple in the UK, but what we do is we look for early stage startups, and they have to be pretty special to get into our programs. And once they're in our programs, we seek to accelerate their businesses. And we do that in a couple of different ways. We do it with mentorship. Any like managing director for Techstars, or anybody really with Techstars, if you ask them, what is Techstars, what do you guys do? Probably the first or second word out of their mouth is going to be mentor or mentor-driven. It's a 3-month program. 10 companies, 3 months, 120K. We take, in my program, 10 companies per year. We run 1 program a year, March through June. So we ran our first program this year and took 10 companies through, and now they're all off fundraising and building their businesses. And I'm currently recruiting for our next year's class, 2015, March through June. So we take 10 companies each year. It's a 3-month program. So I mentioned mentors. So the first entire month of the program is strictly about mentorship. So we'll have somewhere between 100 and 125 mentors just to our program itself in Kansas City. And what happens is we call it Mentor Madness. And from weeks 2 through week 4 of the program, all 10 companies meet with all of those mentors. So if you're a company in our program, if you're one of the founders, you're going to be meeting with over 100 mentors just in the first few weeks. And it's a huge, huge part of our accelerator. That's a big way we accelerate their businesses, because they're getting all this different advice from all these industry experts on the mobile side, on the health side, and just general entrepreneurs that's steering them in the right direction. We also help them filter out the feedback, right? So it's another thing we call mentor whiplash, which sounds really violent, and it probably feels violent at the time, but it's when you get, feedback from all these different mentors, and you might have 2 amazing mentors and they're telling you exact opposite things. So we'll help the companies sort of sift through and figure out what's right for their business. Also, each of the 10 companies gets 120K in funding at the outset of the program. So right when they come in, they get 100K from Sprint in the form of a convertible note, and they get 20K from Techstars. So the convertible note, obviously that will convert to equity at the appropriate time. The 20K from Techstars, plus the value of the Techstars program, plus lifetime membership in the Techstars network, which I'm going to talk about some more. We take 6% equity stake of every company that comes through. More and more we're skewing towards later stage companies, and some of them are like, well, 6%, do I really want to give up 6% of my company? So that started to be sort of like a sticking point for later stage companies that we really wanted. We really felt like we could help them. So we took that argument off the table by offering an equity-backed guarantee. So we're the only accelerator in the world that offers an equity-backed guarantee. If companies are not satisfied with that 6% at the end of the program, they tell us what they think it was worth, and that's what we take the equity stake down to. It's that simple. There's no strings attached. They can tell us 3, we'll take it to 3. They'll tell us 0, we'll take it to 0. This hasn't happened yet, but we put it out there because it's kind of like putting our equity where our mouth is. We're really confident in our program. We're super confident in our network, We know that we can help these companies long term. I'm going to show you some metrics that kind of demonstrate that. So we're like, you know what, take it off the table. We'll just offer an equity back guarantee. So why Techstars? So this is one of my favorite metrics I was referring to. Roughly 90% of the companies that have been through Techstars programs since 2007, which is when we started in Boulder, Colorado, 90% are either still active or have been acquired. 10% have failed. So essentially what we do is we take, for the first timer, 12% success rate. We essentially like flip that metric on its ear, right? So when you're out on your own and you're starting something new and it's really hard and you don't have a great network, it's hard, it's difficult to succeed, right? The odds are kind of stacked against you. So we flip that around and we want to give the companies in our program what we call sort of almost like an unfair advantage. Like, they have funding, they have our network. It still comes down to the team, right? We can't do it for them. They're going to have to do it. But we've been able to achieve these rates of success by putting some of those pieces in place, so it's pretty cool. The average raise for a company that raises after Techstars is about $2 million. So this is after they're done with the program. We have our big demo day. In Kansas City, by the way, we had 1,700 attendees that I always brag about. It was really great. We had a huge, huge support from the community. If they go on to raise, they're going to raise about $2 million. So pretty good track record there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Techstars community impact. This is really important. I don't know, raise your hand if you've ever heard of Brad Feld. Great. Brad Feld is one of the original co-founders of Techstars. He literally wrote the book on startup communities. He's written several books. One of his books, Startup Communities, is like a classic. If you're not familiar with it and you're into startup communities or you want to be into startup communities, I highly recommend you check it out. Techstars was one of the main reasons Techstars even came into existence, and why Brad wanted to do it was because of the community impact. And Boulder was like the poster child for how to build a startup community. It started with very little there, and now they have arguably outside of the coasts, Boston, New York, San Francisco, they probably have the strongest startup community in the country. And it's because of what Techstars started, but then the whole community gets involved and plays a key role. Obviously, we can't do it ourselves. And so now there's a huge density of startups in Boulder. There's a great density of investors in Boulder, both angel and institutional investors. So it's had a huge, huge community impact. So what does that mean for other cities, like Kansas City? Well, Kansas City is younger than Boulder from a startup community standpoint. But so we need exactly what happened to Boulder. We need that to happen to us. So just to throw out first a couple of metrics, 500 companies have been through Techstars since 2007. Those 500 have raised about $750 million. Those companies have created over 2,000 jobs, right? So you're starting to see the community impact just from that. Our mentor network is over 2,000 strong. So of course, like I mentioned, like we have about 100 mentors in our program. We have 15 different programs. So we're gonna have a lot of mentors in our network. Those mentors help the companies in their own program, and we reach out network-wide to Techstars to help our companies too. So they're not silos. It's one big network, which is great. I mentioned 15 different programs in 12 different cities. It's 12 cities because we have 3 programs in New York and we have 2 programs in London. And the other cities, we have 1 each. To me, so far in Kansas City, the biggest community impact we've had is that so far 2 of my companies have relocated to Kansas City from elsewhere. One relocated to KC from New York, another from Salt Lake City. Yes?
Is that FitBark?
Yes, FitBark was a New York one.
I'm friends with that today.
Awesome, that's so cool. Yeah, so FitBark is a Fitbit for dogs. That usually gets a couple of smiles. So it's a great product, and they were in New York, and they were really drawn to Kansas City for 2 reasons. One is it's probably going to be a big source of investment for them, and secondly, Kansas City is the animal health capital of the country. A lot of people don't know that. We have this thing called the Animal Health Corridor, and FitBark is really leveraging that, so it's great. So yeah, 2 of our companies have relocated. A third one is, I can't say who it is, but he's house hunting with his wife, who's pregnant with their 4th child, which I sympathize with. but I think Kansas City would be a great place for them right now. And it's an awesome place to raise a family. And it looks like they're probably going to get funded from KC as well. So it's huge because, you know, a startup will relocate to KC. They'll most likely get funded in KC. They'll grow their company there. And so if we can do that every year, if we can get 3 companies to relocate to Kansas City every year and get funded and grow their businesses, look what happens after 3 years, look what happens after 6 years. That's a huge impact on the community. So that is, to me, the most meaningful way that Techstars helps build startup communities. And it's really cool because I'm seeing it happen right in front of me. So we are a mobile health accelerator. I probably don't have to sell this crowd too much on why mobile health. You know, 150 million smartphones in this country, a healthcare system that's obviously has many, many opportunities for innovation. It was attractive to our partner Sprint, obviously on the mobile side. We're going to do mobile something. Kansas City has an amazing life sciences community. We have amazing hospitals like KU Med, which is ranked top 10 in several different disciplines nationally every year. We have amazing research facilities as well. So it was got to be kind of a no-brainer as far as doing mobile health in KC, and it's worked out really well so far. Why Kansas City? So first of all, this is not Kansas we're talking about. Kansas is close. We're really close to the state line. When people say Kansas City, generally we're talking about Kansas City, Missouri. Home of the Royals, home of the Chiefs. It's the city that has the real downtown, and it has a real startup community. It didn't really have much of a startup community 4 or 5 years ago, and then Google Fiber came to town. I don't want to say there wasn't anything because the Kauffman Foundation has been in KC for a very long time, and they've done a huge amount locally as well as globally. It's an amazing institution. But we didn't have that startup density, you know, that we were really looking for. Google Fiber was the catalyst. So the neighborhood where Google Fiber was first installed in this country is now called the Kansas City Startup Village, and that's not a coincidence. So once it was installed in this neighborhood, just all these startups gravitated there, and now we have 25 businesses working out of this neighborhood that's right on the state line of Kansas and Missouri, and it's worked out really, really well. So the startup community is getting there, the life sciences community is super strong, like I mentioned, and the technology resources are great. So Sprint has a really, really active role in the startup community. We have Garmin, we have Cerner, we have Hallmark, who you normally wouldn't, you know, associate with tech, but they actually have a lot of really smart technology people there. So we have these great resources in KC that, you know, that a lot of people don't know about, and we leverage all of them for the program. So we have what I like to brag is the nicest accelerator facility in the world. I really don't know if that's true, but it sounds really good and it's a really cool place. It's 12,000 square feet, it's got game room. I don't know why they picked shuffleboard, but actually it's a lot of fun. And it's designed by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. You can write on every surface. And we do have a ping pong table, but we went one step beyond that, and it's a ping pong table that actually transforms into a conference room table. That's cool. So it's a great place for startups to accelerate their businesses. And I like to think that KC is the optimal place to have an accelerator like this. It's got the supportive community, it's got the technology resources, it doesn't have the big distractions of a city like Boston, New York, San Francisco. I spent a lot of time in all of those cities and they're awesome. I grew up in Boston, but I think Kansas City, if you're going to be heads down building your business, it's a really awesome place to do that. So who should apply it? What are we looking for? You know, we're mobile health. It has to have, the product has to have a mobile component to it, either now or in the near future. On the health side, really wide spectrum. Right? I want the biggest, the best applicant pool I can get. So it could be wearables, it could be animal health, it can be big data, it can be traditional, you know, apps or platforms that seek to help treat or track chronic illness symptoms. Really a really wide spectrum that we're looking for. We're also looking for a wide spectrum for another reason, which is we want these 10 companies to complement each other. We don't want a lot of overlap. and we want them to collaborate. So these are 10 companies, which in the case of the last program, all came from different places, right? None of them came from KC. They were all from different places, one from Australia, that was the longest trip. They're all in a room together for 90 days. So naturally they're going to like bond and help each other. And we want them to feel free and open to do that. So we pick diverse teams for that reason also. The bonds that are made during Techstars programs are lifelong bonds. It's really, really cool. It's my favorite part of the program, actually. So these are like friends for life. It's like just going through battle together. It's a very intense program. And what you come out with on the other side are great friends and an awesome network. And they're still, to this day, they're helping each other. A couple of them are partnering. So I'd love to see that. So let's talk a little bit about Sprint. Why is Sprint doing this? Sprint has 3 main reasons for doing this. One is business development. I mean, they want to see what's being innovated in the healthcare space. They do have a healthcare division. They also believe that their healthcare division or market is underserved. And so they want to see what else is being innovated, and they make an active effort to partner with the companies that come through the accelerator, which is great. Out of the 10, it's not always going to be a fit, but they partnered with 4 out of the 10. So one example is a company called SickWeather. They mine social media data in real time to provide illness forecasting on your phone, just like the Weather Channel, except for sicknesses. So Sprint preloaded their app on every single Sprint Android phone during the program. So those are the types of partnerships that we're going for, and it was a huge spike for them, and it really set them on a really good course. So Sprint's definitely serious about partnering. They're committed to Kansas City. They started really getting out into KC, honestly, about 2 years ago. Before that, they really didn't play much of a role in the community, like a lot of other big businesses in KC. But they made a concerted effort, and this one individual from Sprint just started getting out there, and he sort of became sort of the catalyst for the accelerator. He's the one that convinced Techstars to come into Kansas City, and they're continuing to do a ton for the community. So that's another big reason for them. And they want to innovate themselves, right? So they're a $30 billion company, and they've been around for a long, long time. Especially now they have a new CEO who's an entrepreneur himself. They want to spur innovation within their own company. And they felt like this is a great way to do it. They get their mentors involved, right, which helps our companies. Their mentors have big networks. The mentors can provide expert advice, but also their mentors sort of get that entrepreneurial bug. You know what I mean? They feel more entrepreneurial. They get this innovation thing going. They hold sprint events at the accelerator, and also we go onto campus during the program as well. So there's a lot of cross-pollination that happens in Sprint, and really wants that to continue to spur things within their own company. What does Sprint provide? Funding. So I mentioned the 100K convertible note. That comes from Sprint. It's optional. Teams don't have to take that convertible note. All of our 10 teams did take it, by the way. Amazing accelerator workspace, direct access to their executives, which is huge, and then access to other resources within Sprint. So they basically just open up their whole campus to us. So their headquarters campus is located about a 20-minute drive from our accelerator. They wanted it separate on purpose, but close enough so it was easy to get to. So, wireless product development expertise, data and monetization, distribution, a large industry partner ecosystem. Those are just a few. And they have testing labs that we use. They have these sort of like, I forget what they call it. It's like, the fishbowl, where they have user testing. So it's like basically they have their focus groups, and they open that up to our companies, and a couple of our companies use that during the program, which was awesome. So they're incredibly, incredibly engaged. So that was it. That was my big spiel. We're really, really excited to be doing the second year of this program. So my job right now is kind of split. I'm helping the 10 companies that already went through March through June, and then I'm recruiting for our next 10 companies. They're going to be joining us, and we're going to be making invitations to this January to start in March. So that's pretty much it. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, John, I've got a question. So I'm sure you've had a lot of stuff in 90 days. But what's the process for continuing to engage the 10 graduates on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because for me personally, I stay very engaged with them. We keep the Techstars network engaged with them. They talk to our mentors. So during the program, remember I talked about Mentor Madness, where they meet with all these mentors? So what comes out of that at the end of Mentor Madness is hopefully they will have connected with and adopted basically 3 to 5 lead mentors. And we want those lead mentors not just to be mentors during the program on an ongoing basis. We want these mentors to help them forever. We want them to be their lifelong mentors. I've talked to a couple of Techstars alumni from like 2010, and they still talk to their mentors every month that they had in that program. That's what I want. That's what every program wants. So from a networking standpoint, they're going to be in touch with their mentors. They're going to be in touch with the broader network. And then just a little anecdote to illustrate this is I was in Boston the other day meeting with an applicant for our 2015 program. While I was meeting with him, I got 2 texts and a phone call from 3 different of my CEOs. So I'm in touch with my CEOs all the time. I'm always helping them, whether it's funding, whether it's biz dev, whether it's feedback on their product, whatever. There's a high level of interaction that happens on an ongoing basis. Plus, we have people who are at our headquarters in Boulder, and their only job, these 2 people, is post-program engagement. Not just between the companies and the network, but between the network itself. So we want our mentors to get rewarded. When we bring them in, one of our tenets is give without the expectation of getting anything back in return. That, to me, that's a great description of a mentor. But we do want them to get something back. We want them to be rewarded, and so we actively do that as well. And so that way we really try and avoid any of sort of like the pitfalls. We have different offices in different locations and they turn into silos. We don't want that. We want it to be one big network that people stay engaged with. That was a really long answer to your question, but hopefully I answered it. Yes?
Yeah, when you're recruiting startups, how do you what's your vetting process like? And
Great question. What do we look for? How do we vet our applicants? So we have a saying at Techstars that in this order, what we look for is team, product, market, traction. So I'm a little bit biased because, we're a healthcare accelerator. So I may be putting a little bit more emphasis on traction than some of the other programs do. Because let's face it, healthcare just takes longer. If you want, especially if you're selling to providers, it can be a long road. But the emphasis on team is still there. And so one of the reasons I encourage applicants to apply early and not wait until right before the deadline is that gives me a lot more time to spend with them. So I get to know them, hopefully in person. So I have like this period of time that's earmarked just to take a couple of short plane trips wherever I need to go and actually meet these applicants and hang out with them, get to know them, and make sure that I think it's the program's going to benefit them, and also make sure they're going to be right for the program and right for Techstars. Techstars is like super picky about the founders that we take in, right? So they have to meet certain criteria. If a founder has an amazing product, they have $5 million in revenue, they've attracted top tier funding, and they really want to be a part of our program, and we believe they're dishonest or unethical, it's not happening. That's the last thing we want to be a part of our program, to represent Techstars. So we're super picky about the people. So it's by far the most important criteria. Yes?
It seems like you're not talking about startups, you're talking about someone who's a stage beyond that. If you have a team that can say, we're going to take 3 months off and go to Kansas City. Well, most people I know have mortgages and have families and have commitments and can't just take time off and go 3 months somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a great point.
They have jobs.
And we do have those situations where there's a team that I really want, and even there's a team that really wants to be in the program, and they just had a baby, or they have a job they can't leave. Typically, for most of the startups we're looking at, they're far enough along so that most of them have either quit their jobs or they're about to quit their jobs, and sometimes the $120K that they get from the program is sort of like the final thing that they need to quit their jobs and actually get paid while they're in the program. But what you say is absolutely true. Being a healthcare accelerator, we tended to skew a little older than most accelerator programs. And we did definitely have some moms and dads in the program. And it's tough. It's tough. It's, I have a family and I hate being away from them. I encourage them to go home on weekends when they could. But the tricky part is, and this is the catch, is that it really is an on-site program. I tried it with one of my CEOs from the last program because his wife was going through her residency and they have a baby and he just had to be home for, it was a week a month during the program. And so I used it as a test and it was horrible. It was one of those, it was a lessons learned, right? It was, I'm going to see if this works, if him being off site for this amount of time. It was very, very difficult. It was difficult for me, it was difficult for him. He didn't get out of it what I wanted him to get out of it towards the end. He had to actually take 2 weeks off in the last month. So it really is meant to be on site. It is difficult to leave your home and your family and your friends for 3 months, and I empathize with that. It's a sacrifice. What I like to remind them is it's temporary. It's just 3 months, and you go back to where you were. And what you get out of that 3 months, hopefully, and what I've seen is it makes it well worth the sacrifice. It's a huge, it's a big investment in your startup. And basically what you're doing is you're kind of like throwing down the gauntlet and saying, I'm going for it. I'm gonna do this thing for 3 months, and trust me, for those 3 months, you're basically living at the accelerator. Although I try hard for my teams not to burn out, it's a big commitment from that standpoint too. But we're always going to have those teams where logistically it's just not possible. And I always, so there's the personal and the business argument, right? So you're talking about mostly the personal argument, which I generally don't debate that at all. If someone says, sorry, I have a couple of young children, or I just have this family situation, or I have a parent I have to care for, it's like, I'm not going to try and argue with that. That'd be pretty bad for me to do that, right? If they argue from the business standpoint, say, I don't want to disrupt my business, I feel like we'll slow down, I can't uproot my team. That's to me, that's like, that's my trigger to launch into my pitch of, how it's going to do the opposite of what they're fearing as well. It's actually going to accelerate your team. So, but the personal side, absolutely, that happens. Yes.
All your participants, are they technical? Are there some layman?
For the founders, yeah, absolutely. There's a mix. The preference is always to have in-house engineers. We don't always have that, but that's the preference. And so what I try and do is, if a team comes in and they've developed their product, but they've outsourced the development of that product, I work with them to start hiring engineers during the program. But sure, we get a mix. I probably had, I had more non-technical CEOs than I would have liked in my last program. I probably had at least half were non-technical. So yeah, it does happen. Yes?
Just wondering a little bit about pitch day and kind of what it takes to build up to that. I mean, it seems like a big part of that 3 months is preparing for pitch day. Can you talk about that?
Love talking about demo day. Demo days are awesome. So I talked about how the first month is mostly about mentorship, and they take that advice and that feedback, and they basically just start crushing it in month 2, right? So they start executing in month 2. Month 2 is all about execution. Well, for the majority of the team, that continues on for the rest of the program. They can continue to execute, right? That's the whole point, is you want them to accelerate. One exception. For the CEO, I work with them to start practicing their pitch at the beginning of month 3, because it takes that long. We are literally practicing their demo day pitch. Of course, we're creating from scratch for the entire month. So, I know it by heart, they know it by heart by the end. And it's really, really important, not just for demo day. Yes, there are investors at demo day. It's mostly community. Any Techstars demo day you go to is going to be mostly community, but some investors. And it's important for that. It's important to end it on a good note, with a bang. But all of the CEOs have come to me since demo day and said, I'm so glad that we put in that exhausting, frustrating amount of time towards the end of the program working on this pitch. At the time they were hating it, but they said it has helped them so much in how to present their company when they're in front of investors, when they're in front of potential customers, potential partners. So Demo day is more than just demo day. It's more than just a show, and more than just a symbol at the end of the program. It really does help them build those skills to present themselves, and that's hard. As the other thing I would mention is, pitching is hard. It rarely comes natural to anybody. It takes a ton of repetition. There's so many different things involved in delivering a nice pitch. I know I have a ways to go. I mean, it's articulation, it's body language, it's pacing. There's so many different things involved, and we bring in experts. So I actually hire, there's a couple of people I know that I bring in, and one of them works on their, like their body language and their articulation. Another one works on something else. So in the end, they come up with a pretty polished pitch, and I was really proud of the 10 CEOs that pitched in front of the 1,700 people. Most of them hadn't been up in front of, anything close to that in the theater, and they did great. So it's a big deal. Yes?
What's your average team size, and what have you seen works best?
Yeah, great question. The question was average team size, and what team size works best. We average 3 to 4 team members per team. We've had 2. I had 9. All 9 weren't on site. And by the way, they did not leave the program with 9. A lot of stuff happens during the program. It accelerates the good stuff and the bad stuff. So, 3 to 4 is typical. I think more important than the number of founders that are on site are the types of founders. So I need the CEO on site for the duration of the program. I need the CTO on site all the time. If there's like a couple of core members, sometimes we'll have like 2 core co-founders, and then the rest of them aren't technically co-founders, but they came in early, and larger teams as well. So sometimes they'll send like 2 or 3 core members to be there for the entire 90 days, and they'll rotate other members on and off for the rest of the program. So I'm pretty flexible about that, as long as the core members are on site.
Okay.
Yes?
How do you go about sourcing talent, in particular technical talent, to join a startup? You mentioned some startups that don't have technical talent. Where do you get the engineers from? The best ones are probably already working somewhere. What's your process for that?
Great question. We don't really have a process. It's wherever we can find them. Kansas City is the same as any other small startup community. Technical resources are scarce. They are often snapped up by companies like Sprint and Cerner. And so we tend to not use or not recommend typical headhunters, only because the price is generally too steep. And these are still early stage startups, most of whom are fairly bootstrapped at that point and don't feel like shelling out 25 or 30K fee for an engineer. So we work our network. We have good relationships with our universities in the Kansas City region. We just do whatever we can. It's not easy. I'm not going to tell you that we can easily source in Kansas City and just supply all the teams with everything they need locally. Not the case. Some of them had to go outside Kansas City during the program. That's just the way it is. So, it's. I think part of it also is building credibility, and I think that's true not just of Techstars, of anybody that comes into a city. It's hard to get people to leave their full-time stable jobs for a startup, even if they're getting equity and a decent salary. So the network I found is just working our network, which grows every day. We found the most success, but we have not found a magical solution to that. Yes?
Let's shift the conversation a little bit to Rochester specifically.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had much opportunity to learn about Mayo Clinic and some of their initiatives as it relates to spurring entrepreneurship and developing startup businesses. I've had experience with the Sprint Accelerator in the Kansas City ecosystem, and it seems like there's a lot of similarities to what Mayo is sort of trying to morph into as what Sprint has done. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious for your thoughts on maybe how or the process that somebody like Mayo Clinic would go through to get Techstars engaged in a real discussion and process to bring that to Rochester.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can talk about it in general terms too first, because I was having this conversation earlier with someone here. It doesn't take much, I don't believe, to get it started. And what I mean by that is, it doesn't take a big corporation much to start to have a presence in the community. And that presence is also going to build some credibility in that community. Maybe make the people in that startup community feel a little bit better about being part of it, maybe about leaving their day jobs, right? So when Sprint started in the community, basically they just started sponsoring startup events. And that doesn't cost a lot of money, you know, especially for a big company. So they just started doing that, seeing what's out there. They didn't know. You know, they consulted Google Fiber. You know, that's really when they started getting out there. They asked Google Fiber, how can we help? Like, what do we do? They didn't know. And so they just started doing that. And then as they moved forward, they started getting a feel for like, okay, what a startup community is, what can help a startup community, what types of events can bring that community together. And then as they did that, they understood better sort of what programs within Sprint, you know, could benefit startups and fledgling entrepreneurs. And so it started really small. And now it's grown into this thing where they have, so I don't know if, you probably don't know this, so for those of you who haven't been to, I know there's a few people who've been to my accelerator, which is awesome. So our accelerator is a lot more than just Techstars. So they built out the second floor, it's a 2-floor building, they built out the second floor for Techstars. Remember, Techstars only runs 3 months out of the year. This is a 12,000 square foot facility, actually 15,000 between the first floor. So they hold events. There's events like 2 or 3 times a week at the accelerator. We do startup, we just had Startup Week in Kansas City there. We do Sprint themselves holds events there. Pretty much any community event you can think of, we've probably held it at the accelerator. And that's on the second floor. On the first floor, there's co-working and community space. So there's a space for established companies to, you know, rent a desk long term. And so we have like, you guys know, like Up Global, they run Startup Weekend. So Up Global's KC headquarters is in our accelerator. And so I don't know if you've ever heard of a media company called Silicon Prairie News. They're with us as well downstairs. So that's a big deal because it's starting to be like the center for the community. And then the co-working space is just free and wide open, and anybody can come in and use it anytime during the business hours. So you start to have these collisions in this thing that Sprint is doing. You know, Sprint, it's only been there for a year, you know, really less than a year. But it starts to gain momentum and people start to gravitate towards it. So you can start off super small. And, you know, I think what, you know, we talk about Techstars, I think what brought Techstars to Kansas City was all the other stuff that happened before that, right? So it was Google Fiber, it was Kaufman, there's an organization called Pipeline, which is a mentoring organization in KC. So there was all this momentum, and there was, Techstars felt like there was a large enough startup community and enough resources to support the program. 1,700 people at Demo Day, Techstars was right. So, you know, that's what it takes. It takes a community that's strong enough to support it, and hopefully a regional ecosystem. It doesn't necessarily have to be like when we talk about investors. And I know that, you know, Rochester probably doesn't have a ton of investors. Well, you know what? Kansas City doesn't have a ton of investors. It's better now than it used to be, but we're still working to really build that part of it up. But regionally, it has a good amount of investors, right? So it doesn't have to be right in Kansas City. So there's a decent amount of investors in Omaha. There's some in Des Moines. There's a big new fund in Columbus, Ohio that was started by former Sequoia partners, $350 million fund. So all of those things sort of, you know, help the region out. And I think that's a big reason why Techstars goes into communities. You know, there does have to be some minimum confidence level that we can have an impact in the community. And as long as that sort of base level of support is there and the base level ecosystem is there, then Techstars seriously considers it. I saw a few other hands up before. Yes?
So with the Sprint, how high was the mandate? It came from the CEO or C-level executive?
Oh, like who made the decision at Sprint?
What type of
It came from the
support do you have?
CEO. Yeah, it usually always comes from the CEO. So he's no longer the CEO, but at the time, Dan Hesse was the CEO of Sprint, and he was very, very engaged. He was at the accelerator with my teams on day one. He gave the big keynote speech at our demo day at the end. So he was very, very engaged, and I think you'll find that in our other accelerators where we partner with other companies. So the newest accelerator that that completed their program is Disney. So we partnered with Disney in LA to do media and entertainment. And the Disney CEO was incredibly engaged, and he himself mentored the teams. And he basically told his staff he was like, this is your priority. You are going to work with these teams, and you're going to partner with these teams. We're going to figure out ways to partner with these teams. And he's probably been like the most engaged CEO we have throughout our ecosystem. And sure enough, Disney struck up partnerships with 10 teams in the program. So it's critical to have that from the top, for sure. Yes?
John, can you talk about maybe at the surface like what might appear to be like a conflict of interest? You know, if you're Sprint and you're investing in companies that might be rivals someday, or Disney that are doing media and things like that. Talk about how that dynamic plays out.
Yeah, that's a good question. The question is conflict of interest with Sprint Business. No, it really hasn't come up too much. I'm trying to think of an example. I can't think of one off the top of my head that was an actual conflict of interest with something they were doing. So we have a rule, and this goes not just for Sprint, but for any of our mentors, that if they have a business or if they've invested in a business that's a direct competitor to one of the companies that's in our program, that they are very transparent about that, and typically they will not meet with that company because just listening to the you're hearing all the details. So first of all, we make sure that everything's out in the open, right? We want to be totally transparent. Also, Sprint plays a big role in selecting the companies. So after we've whittled the list down, I will bring it to my Sprint counterparts and Sprint executives, and we'll all huddle together. And in the end, together, we decide what 10 companies are going to get invited. And so, typically they wouldn't select someone that, if it's a big initiative of theirs and this company conflicts with that, unless they can see it fitting in nicely. If they see it as a conflict, they typically would say, not a good fit. What else? Those are all really good questions, by the way. Yes?
From kind of the community perspective again, and Mayo Clinic being part of it, but then there's also a lot going on with our states and local governments right now. Are there any incentives in Kansas City provided to get more of the community aspect going?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually having that conversation earlier today. The question was, did KC provide any financial incentives or otherwise to lure startups in to relocate to Kansas City after the program? And the answer is not really. There's not a ton of startup sort of incentive programs in the Kansas City area. Obviously, there are tax abatements and other things that are typically geared towards larger companies. But I think what really helped is that we have the city behind us 100%. So everyone from the mayor of KC to economic development, we have 2 different economic development organizations, even like the Chamber of Commerce, like everyone is behind us. We all want the same thing. And throughout the program, they got to meet the companies and explain to them basically, what's great about starting and building a business in KC and how they can be of assistance to them. And so while there weren't any specific packages that were offered to the startups, I think that level of support and direct access to those organizations really helped. I think it just made them feel like not only were they welcome, but they were going to get an ongoing level of support, which they do. So it made a big difference.
I just want to follow up with that comment. I've been in Kansas City. I think what's also important as relates to what you just said about all the support from those organizations is that one of the top 5 initiatives of Kansas City was to be the most entrepreneurial city, right, in the United States. So what that did was shifted the tone, right? It's one thing for us to try to push those organizations to be more open to the entrepreneurial ecosystem and supportive, but when you make that initiative, they all have to kind of line up. So I think that's been really helpful for Kansas City.
I agree. Yeah, I agree 100%. it's definitely something, and just like, you know, having the CEOs buy in, you know, for the accelerator is top down, same thing with the city, right? Like, so the mayor was on board like from day one. He attended, you know, the grand opening at the accelerator when we announced the program. He gave a speech. So, you know, the top down thing is huge. And yeah, I mean, we see Techstars as just another step, right? We're always trying to get better. We're never done building the community. We're always trying to make it better. So a lot of things happened before us, and I hope a lot of things are going to happen, you know, after Techstars too. And just more great things coming in. Cisco just came in a couple of months ago, and they're wiring Kansas City to be the first smart city to connect the citizens with civic agencies. So just things keep happening. So it's great momentum right